Welcome to the EndurHunt podcast. Join me as I share my experiences as an emergent hunter, offer advice on how to overcome challenges, and pursue your passion for hunting. This is a great episode with Kent Boucher from First Gen Hunter. I was lucky enough to be on his podcast and to have him on to be able to talk about his First Gen Hunter story. I think that you're really going to like it. This is a longer one, but I assure you that it is worth it. Without any further ado, let's just jump right in. All right. Today I have with me fellow First Gen Hunter Kent Boucher. He's the host of the First Gen Hunter podcast. I was lucky enough to be a guest on his podcast recently, episode 173, for those who want to check it out. I just wanted to start by saying thank you for coming on mine. I had an awesome time on your podcast, and hopefully we can do some repeat of the good times and
Oh
conversations
yeah,
here.
yeah, for sure, man. It was an honor to have you on my show, and we first gen hunters, we got to stick together. We don't have all the crew of hunting buddies that a lot of other guys that have been doing it their whole life do, and in a way, everyone's always knocking social media all the time, which it deserves it, but there's also a lot of good that comes from it. The connectivity, you can find another community out there of people, and really some of my best friends now have come through some of those connections, and I've done hunts with them, and have gotten to just enjoy their friendship as a result of connecting over social media. And so that's what we're doing today, man. We kind of ran into each other on Instagram, saw we had a similar message, and it's just thoroughly enjoyed our conversation that we had recently on my show, and I'm humbled to be here on EndurHunt, and getting to be asked some questions on my hunting experiences.
Yeah, and I have a bunch of different questions I want to ask, and we'll get to all of those. I think I told you at the end of your podcast there were so many things I wanted to talk about, but it's like we'll save it for when. This way, the conversations can
That's
be
right.
natural and things can just kind of flow. But like you said, none of this would be happening if it wasn't for
Yeah.
social media. The amount of hunting knowledge that I've gained from being able to ask questions to people and connect with people just over Instagram or Go Wild or anything like that. I mean, the there are a lot of negative aspects to it, but there's a lot of benefits too if you use it the right
Yeah.
way. To kick things off, I thought it would be good to just, since we're first gen hunters and we didn't grow up hunting, it's not something we had. If you could talk about what your first hunting experience was
Yeah,
like.
that's a great question. And earlier this well, let's give them a little peek at the man behind the curtain right now. This is our second start to this podcast. It's been unfortunately, in order to avoid technical difficulties, I tried to set up this thing where I was going to come into the library and record, and I found out when I got here that they weren't going to open for another half an hour. So I tried to audible, go to a coffee shop, and it all just fell apart there. So I'm back at the library now that we're a half an hour delayed, and we're giving it another run here. But uh, I think that kind of illustrates what it's like being a first gen hunter. You're playing how you think it's going to go.
Absolutely.
How what you think you should be expecting, and it's totally different. And that's kind of how my first hunting experience went. I call myself a first gen hunter because I didn't have, my dad, he didn't hunt. My mom didn't hunt. They didn't, take me hunting. They really wouldn't have allowed me to go hunting. Um, Unfortunately, when I was, very young, toddler age, probably, one of my dad's friends and coworkers was killed in a hunting accident. And
Oh,
that,
wow.
yeah, I mean, just tragedy, right? Major trauma there to obviously this man's family, but also to my parents as his friends, and it it like really shaped how they viewed hunting then, and even outside of hunting firearms, they weren't anti-gun or anti-hunting really, but they were like, why would you have anything like that around? All that can do is bring destruction and pain. Um, and hunt, as far as hunting goes, why would you pick up something that is a hobby and when there's such high risk? It's like, why can't you just, you know, enjoy something else? And that's what we did. We enjoyed all. We were a big sports family. played a lot of sports growing up, and uh, getting to the point where I had my first hunt. It was interesting because even though they didn't hunt, my grandfather, my mom's dad, he lived out on a farm in Iowa, and he had hunted some when he was younger. He'd walked some ditches with his dad a few times for pheasants, and he'd done a little bit of goose hunting. Wasn't a deer hunter at all. There weren't deer when he was growing up. There literally were uh, you know maybe a couple thousand deer, and that's even on the high side, maybe more in the hundreds of deer in Iowa. Now we call ourselves a whitetail state. Shows you how much things can change
Wow.
in a very short amount of time. But he had some hunting experience, and so when I was in my 20s and I was calling my own shots for my life, I was like, I got a bird dog, and I was like, this bird dog and I, we're going to learn to hunt together. And so my first hunt, I went with my grandfather. He was into his mid 70s, late 70s at that time, and so he didn't go the whole stretch with me, but he kind of showed me a little bit of the ropes. But that was my first hunting experience. Of course, we didn't bag anything. We did flush some birds, and it was I got a couple shots off there. I was never going to hit anything. They were I don't know if you've ever done any pheasant hunting before, but once the birds get up
I
and
have.
they move away from you, you know how that is then. So they're going, I think what's a pheasant
Mm-hmm.
fly at 35 miles an hour, I think. You know, they're just you're not going to catch them once they have that much of a head start on you, and you might dust them with a few pellets, but it's not gonna be anything more than that. And so I got that close that first time, and it was kind of a I'm coming back for more. And I saw a giant buck while we were pheasant hunting. I saw you know I
Oh,
mean, a true giant. Even every buck looks giant when you're a brand new hunter, but this thing he was a 170s, mid 170s class, double drop tine. Each drop tine was like a 9 or 10 inch drop, on each side. I mean, just a big old horse of a deer.
oh,
And so seeing that, it was like, okay, I'm not only going to come back pheasant hunting, but the gun season for deer is coming up soon, and I'm going to do that. And so I did that at a month and a half later, a month later, whenever it was, and that was totally on my own. There was nobody to help me for that. Just walked out there, and looking back, made a million mistakes, and but it was enough to keep me coming. Enough excitement.
yeah, that's awesome. I have pheasant hunted. I did a little bit of that in New Jersey.
Awesome.
I have never bagged a pheasant, but I was with my one buddy. We both started. I probably have to have him on, but we started hunting as first gen
Mm-hmm.
hunters together, but different species. So I was chasing whitetail deer, and he was chasing pheasants, and we would just like hang out with each other and talk about it. Neither of us did really well the first season, but we both found success. And your first success was a pheasant, right? That
Yep.
was the first game animal you got with your bird
Yep.
dog.
That's right. Um,
That's
when
awesome.
let's see here, so it wouldn't have been that year. I just nothing. I didn't bag or tag anything. I did actually on that first deer hunt. I missed a shot at there was like a train of four does that moved in, and I was so just to show you like this is how much of a first gen hunt that was. I had been I went and sat down in my spot that I thought was going to be a good spot. And of course, it was near where I saw that double drop 170s, and didn't
Oh
see
yeah,
anything. Nearly froze to death. I was so underprepared, and I couldn't
been
take
there.
I couldn't take it anymore. Plus, I could hear other shots going off in the distance, and I think that's something that really affects first gen hunters. When you're in an area where there's enough like hunter density that you can hear what's going on with other hunters, you start feeling that pressure of, man, I'm definitely getting something wrong here because everyone else is evidently seeing stuff and they're shooting. And I was like, well, I'm obviously not in the spot. So I got up and I started just walking all over the farm, which is terrible, right? Just terrible for hunting deer. And what happened was I started busting pheasants like left and right. And I was like, you know what? I'm not seeing any deer, but I'm seeing lots of pheasants. And the seasons go at the same time. As long as you have a hunting license, you can hunt pheasants, you know, during any deer season in Iowa. And so I was using a smooth bore shotgun, with rifled slugs. So I huck out all the slugs and put them in my pocket and put in a bunch of pheasant loads. And I just turned my deer hunt into a pheasant hunt. And so I did that for a little while. Then I was like, all right, nothing's happening. I'm just going to head back to the house. And when I did that, sure enough, here's these 4 does, and I have pheasant loads in my shotgun. And so I quick, eject those shells and fumble in a couple of rifled slugs, and they stood there and let me do it. And they kind of like, deer in the headlights, literally. And I missed 2 shots at like 50 yards, and so my a deer was very close to being my first harvested animal, but that season ended on that second missed shot. And so it was a whole year before I went out again. And then I went hunting with my very good friend Weston, and we had walked and walked all day. And I think he had maybe missed a bird, or he had winged a bird, and we just couldn't find it or something like that. And we were kind of wrapping things up for the day, and my bird dog gets Birdie, and Wes is like, "Hey, look at your dog. What's he doing there?" And which was a mentoring moment because he recognized that before I did. And sure enough, Theo was Birdie, and I kicked around a little bit, and up flies this little rooster, and I think it took me like 3 shells to finally hit the thing, and I got him down, and Theo recovered him, and man, did that feeling just change things. I was still going to go back hunting, but at that time I considered myself more of a fisherman than a hunter. But
Mm.
after I started tasting that success that I really thought was, it's kind of like hitting a half court shot, on the basketball court. It's like, yeah, it could happen, but probably not for me. And now here it is. Here's this bird that, my dog pointed and I flushed and got to eat. So it was pretty special.
You guys got to operate as a team. It's awesome to get your dog into it.
Mm-hmm.
I tried training my dog to be a pheasant dog, and she did all right, but we ended up moving to Texas, and there's not really pheasants here unless you live in the
Mm-hmm.
Panhandle, which is 8+ hours from me.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a long drive. What was it like training Theo, and how was
Yeah.
that?
That's actually, I'm glad you asked me. I've never been asked that before. It's kind of weird, right? Because I was training a dog for hunting and I'd never gone. It was like I was already working with him, and so we would have purchased him from the breeder in June of that year, and I didn't hunt with him until November. So for 5 months, I had this dog, and I had never been hunting in my life. And my grandpa had, um, I can't remember if this was before or after. He had gotten me a Bob West gun dog magazine training video, which turns out Bob West, at this time, I was a teacher. I was a biology teacher, and I lived in Iowa, but drove across the river. I was in the Quad City area. I drove across the river, Mississippi River, every day into Illinois to teach. And Bob West, I later found out, lived in the community directly across from the town where I was teaching, which was just really kind of like a. And one of my coworkers was his next door neighbor, so I got to meet Bob and
Wow.
talk to Bob, which was really cool. But somehow I got some of these principles. I think I must have already been like watching stuff online. YouTube at that point was definitely around and people have been watching it for years. But like the how to stuff on YouTube was still like really, becoming something. And so I probably watched some stuff on regular like hunting channel TV and stuff like that. But but at any rate, I had some principles. Plus, I had, I just knew some people that told me a few things. And so I had some principles where I was working on like retrieving with him, like giving him that, like that, that working dog mindset, I guess you'd say. And I taught him a lot of commands. One of the best things I did was I helped him put him in situations to get used to gunfire. Now, there's good ways to do this and bad ways to do this. The worst way to do this, and people, this is like a common, fairly common thing that, it's like old hunter wisdom, and it's not. It's a bad idea. So don't do this. If anyone's listening and you have a gun dog, some people will take them to the gun range and they'll make that dog just endure, dozens and dozens of shots. That's not realistic. You're not, even if you're on a, filling a limit for duck hunting, you're it's just unlikely that you're going to be hearing hundreds of rounds go off, and with no reward either. It's just sit here and tolerate this, would you, dog? It's like, so
Yeah. That's not how
right,
their
yeah,
brains
yeah.
work.
So if you're a first gen hunter and you're listening to this and you think about getting, don't do that. If someone tells you that, don't do that. You'll ruin your dog. But what I was told by an uncle of mine, um, a great uncle of mine, I should say, who lived up in Wisconsin, he had talked about when I was like a kid, how it's good if you have a dog that you want to hunt with. Every time you feed him, bang pots and pans around by him, make clap your hands really loud and stuff like that. So that way they're getting something good while they're experiencing something that's like uncomfortable to their ears, if that makes sense. And so I did some of that, and that was good wisdom. And then I also had heard that, because I think most dogs, like if you just blank slate a dog, it's probably going to, unless you are intentional about helping them with this, it's probably going to become gun shy. So thankfully, I'd heard that advice, and my dad had also told me that, because we had a dog growing up who was deathly afraid of the 4th of July. Like every 4th of July, she was like whimpering and cowering and everything else. So he had done some research on, okay, how do you help your dog overcome, and thunderstorms, same deal. And of course, we didn't hunt with her or anything, And he had said, if you have a dog that's scared, I read that you should never comfort them when they're afraid of like the fireworks or the thunder. What does everybody want to do when they see Fido, freaking out? They want to like pick him up and hug him. Oh, it's okay, and like, here's, let
Yeah.
me snuggle you. It'll be okay. And what you're doing is you're reinforcing with all your baby talk and all your lovey-dovey TLC that you're giving your dog is, yeah, there is something terrible that's happening right now. Here, let me ease your pain. And you're reinforcing that dog to be afraid of what's happening. And so we lived in a very urban area at the time, and man, our streets during the 4th of July were just, it was filled, they were filled with smoke. There were so many fire, I mean, just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fireworks going off on the 4th of July. And I, anytime he would want to be like, he'd like look at me like, do I need to be afraid? I'd be like, hey, quit whining, or like, oh, it's fine. Is that fireworks? You like fireworks? Like almost get excited about it. And so I had already trained this dog to not be afraid of gunfire, and that was the biggest step there. And then another good thing that I did right away was, uh, you should never let your dog. And maybe I didn't do this right away, but I did it, shortly after I had him. I might have learned this actually from Bob Webb's video that I got a little bit later. I think I got it for Christmas after that first year I hunted. Was don't just allow your dog to go straight to their food. Like be out, like they're this out of control animal. You're just holding them back. No, let me fill your bowl. And then as soon, all right, the bowl's full, go at it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
then they're learning no sense of control, right? And so I still do this with both of my bird dogs. I demand that they sit. They need to know that I'm in charge, right? And that they're here to work for me and not for themselves. And so I demand that they sit and they hold their spot. And I mean, the drool will just be pouring out of their mouths, like they're salivating, like they're just dying to go, which is what you want. That's desire. You want a dog that has desire,
Mm-hmm.
but that they can control that and not just burst into whatever they're doing. And that's an out of control dog, and that's a dog you can't hunt very well. And so that was another thing I really established early on is, hey, I'm the top dog here. You work for me, and as long as you work for me, you will have a place, and you will have a purpose, and you will have love, and you will have your needs met. And so I was already doing all these things, which set him up really well, um, and played into his natural instincts. And so, of the 550 million things I did wrong as a first gen hunter when I was starting out, one thing I did right was set a good foundation for the dog. And then as like I said, my grandpa got me a training video, and I picked up a few more in that Bob West gun dog series, and helped. He's nowhere near like a finished. I always say, please remember, these are a deer hunter's bird dogs. Deer hunting is my number one thing, but I get out with my dogs between 5 and 10 times a season, and everyone's always, they're always like, wow, what do you mean, your dogs did great? They and I think a lot of it just goes back to they learn who they're working for. And Theo, my Brittany, the first one that I went hunting with, he doesn't have really, I mean, we worked on retrieval and stuff. He doesn't have just a real strong retrieval drive like a lab or a golden retriever will, but he's a great like pinpointer. He'll find that bird and he'll just stay with it, or he'll finish it off if it's still, if it's just crippled or something, which is another
Yeah.
critically important thing that he does. And then I have a half Brittany, half poodle rescue dog, and people always kind of like laugh at that and be like, "Oh, what is that?" And she puts finished dogs to shame sometimes. Like, she has a motor that you would not believe, and she retrieves, and she's really, these last couple of seasons, has come into her own, and really has become a great bird dog. And I think a lot of that came from, we got her after Theo, a couple years after we had Theo, and just watching him hunt. And I remember there was like this pivotal time where, like, when I first took her hunting and the gun went off, she like looked at me like, what was that? Is that okay? Or should I be terrified right now? And then Theo's just like, he's like, that's a good thing. Let's go find this bird. And she's just kind of like, oh, all right, I guess it's good. So, it, it just really helped to have him as a teacher to the other dog. And so, that was kind of how, like, I formed that foundation. And then, so in that first hunt, it played well into his instincts, and we got our first bird. Sorry, that was really long winded to explain that, but it's kind of hard to.
Oh no, that was great. No, that was great. There were some like things that I did that you talked about with my dog. That was a great tip though, with the food and the loud noises, the clapping and everything. That's a hot tip
Mm,
for anyone, even if you're an experienced hunter and you're trying to get your dog in. And to your point about, you don't think that Theo's a finished dog, I think people undervalue the fact that going from 0 to 80%
mm,
competency is so much easier than going from 80 to 90 or 90 to
absolutely.
100. I mean, the amount of effort to get there is enormous. And it depends on your reward cycle, right? You're a deer hunter
Right.
first.
Yep.
80% of the way there is probably good enough.
Exactly.
And it's funny you mentioned the part poodle. My hunting buddy, um, the one that's in Pennsylvania that I go out west with every
Mm-hmm.
year, he has a golden doodle, and I definitely chuckled when he first got the golden doodle. But it's a great
Yeah.
dog. It's a surprisingly great dog. I mean, maybe it's not surprising. I was ignorant of the fact, but it was really interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a great story. That one was not on the list of things I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you about, but when Theo came up, that's not something I have a lot of experience with, and I imagine others listening, upland hunting, pheasants is or grouse or anything where, I mean, I guess you don't necessarily flush grouse, but I think that's kind of one of those areas where people are nervous about getting
Mm-hmm.
into as a first gen hunter because the amount of training and effort. And the point you made about finding success is something that I think about a lot, because I think that it's easy to get someone in the field the first
Mm-hmm.
time, but it's hard if they don't reach, like, get some type of reward.
Right.
I used to be all against hunting blinds and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And when I first moved to Texas, I was very against feeders and stuff. And I still have interesting feelings.
Yeah.
Like, it's not my preferred method, but I was thinking about it from a first gen hunter standpoint. It's like, man, that's a great way to
Yep.
get somebody in. You get a feeder and you want to hunt pigs or even does or something, they don't have to struggle as hard to find that
Yeah.
first success. And hopefully that's the bug that gets them.
Yeah.
There are people like you and me who, regardless of success, you were going to do it
Right.
anyway because there's just something wrong in our brains. We
Yep.
have that
That's
adult
right.
onset hunter
That's
disease.
right.
But but for the other people, the ones that we need, in my opinion, to be advocating for what we love to do, they might need a little extra help in finding that success and figuring out how we can expedite that success is something that I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's helpful for all of us to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know that was a little off
No,
topic,
no, I think
but
you're spot
yeah.
on there. And my coworker Nicholas he likes to say he hates it. He hates the concept. He's not a hunter. He's a business guy. He's like, I hate the concept of when people want things to be absolutely perfect so that they spend all their time on making something perfect. And he's talking the concept of like making money. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, when at some points or sometimes you got to be willing to like be like, you know what, if I try and just nitpick this thing, I'm going to end up losing money. I need to make it to where I get to the point where yes, the customer gets a great product, but like having all of my, you know, business ducks in a row in the background, I can figure that out later, and I need to get these good products out to the customers, and be willing to like say, yeah, I know this, you know, we got the product out, but I don't maybe have the best inventory system in place, or I don't have the best, um, you know, follow up system in place yet. It's like, be patient, let that come, get the, you know, get going with something, and don't be so obsessive. And I think that's what, where a lot of you know, people who want to train their dogs to hunt, they can get lost in the weeds. They're like, well, he did go find the bird, but he didn't bring it right to my hand, and I just can't get him to do that. Or he won't heel like I want him to. I mean, he does okay. He comes when I call, but he, you know, it's like, you're getting a great product. You're getting a bird, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, you know, being a deer hunter first, you know, it's just, we only have so much time, and I'm just not going to put in that time ever to get that last 20%, like you said, where I can take these dogs to field trials and stuff like that. And nothing against the people where that's their interest. If that's your interest, fantastic, do that by all means. But for me, it's, you know, pheasants are a lot of fun. I love hunting them, but deer hunting is number one, and deer hunting takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it does. I think that what you were talking about, Nicholas's business example, I think a lot of first gen hunters do that too with
Yeah,
gear. And I don't want to go down the
exactly.
rabbit hole of gear because I'm sure we could do it. And, they think they need to buy the fancy
Mm-hmm.
saddles and Sitka gear and the best rifle they can find to hunt. And it's like that's not the case. I still use the same bow I bought from Dick's Sporting Goods that was like a $350
Mm-hmm.
combo. And I've upgraded it here and there over time. But the reps and the experience is what matters most. Not the gear you have, not having the perfect tag. And that's the thing with Western hunting. I talked to some of my friends that I'm trying to get to go Western hunting. Everybody wants that picture perfect trophy bull elk hunt in Arizona or Utah. And it's like, man, you're probably never going to get it.
Right.
And if you spend your entire life building the points and you do draw that tag, you have no experience
Yep.
and you're either going to need to pay buku bucks for a guide to take you or you're going to eat that
Yep.
tag. And it's like, man, you should just go on over the counter hunts, build up the reps, build up the experience. And that's what's going to make you a good hunter. And I'm I'm throwing stones in a glass house right now because I don't think I'm the greatest hunter. I was actually thinking about it, and I wanted to ask you when you started hunting, because you've been podcasting about hunting almost the amount of time that I've been hunting. So when did you actually start hunting?
Yeah.
Like what
So
year?
I'm a bit of a geezer. I'm 34 now, and I started hunting. I think the first time I went hunting, I was 26. So 8 years ago, but as it is, as you count seasons, I'm in my ninth season of hunting. So 2015, I think November 2015 was the first time I went hunting.
That's awesome, man. That yeah, you got more experience than me, that's for
Hey,
sure. I 2018, so I'm 3 years behind you. I'll get
that's
there.
right. That's right. Well, and I think I mean, now you're going into your sixth season. I think it was really
Yep.
around maybe season 5 and season 6 where I felt like I was finally starting to not just have some of those like base level accomplishments, like maybe you tag a few animals here and there, maybe you learn, be like, oh wow, hey look, there's a scrape, I've learned about these, I see a scrape, that's kind of like that foundational level. But it's kind of around that year 5 and 6 where it's like, okay, what, so I've seen like a few scrapes here, what is this telling me? That's like where you start like making those bigger decisions. And I think once you start getting there, and we're not saying any of this in arrogance, we're just hyper tuned to our progress, right? Because we're learning this as adults, we want to see, are we getting any better? But I think that's kind of like when you start getting into like a higher level of hunting, like where you can kind of almost officially identify as a hardcore hunter, not that you're an expert hunter. I'm not an expert hunter, not by any means, but you like get to that point where you're going beyond just being the casual. Yep, we go out every gun season and I hunt for 2 days a year. And and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with people that limit themselves to that. That is totally fine. That's totally great. But I think most people who decide to pick it up as an adult, they do so because they really want to get into it, that lifestyle. And when you start stacking on that knowledge and applying it in the field, it's like you're earning a degree, and you're able to now take your degree into the workplace and use the skills that you learned in your college course, or your at your to get your welding certificate, or whatever program you were learning it in. You're taking that knowledge and you're practically applying it beyond just like, yeah, you set up on a pinch point and eventually a deer walked by and it didn't matter if it had 200 inches of antler or 2 inches of antler, you were going to shoot it. And again, nothing wrong with that, but that's kind of like that base level spot that pretty much anyone who's going to spend enough time in the woods they're eventually going to be able to achieve some of those things. But like where you're at now, and I think for you it's probably more like you're 2, 3, 4, because you were doing those big western hunts where you just grow. Like your growth trajectory when you do that stuff, I've learned is 10 times as much as when you're just hunting whitetails in your home state. And then again, nothing wrong with that either. That's what I do primarily. But everyone's going to be on a little bit different time. But I think after you got to have at least like 2 and probably more likely 3 seasons under your belt before you start making that shift into like, okay, training wheels are off, and I'm not just pedaling around on my 1 speed. I got this 10 speed bike now, and I know what each gear means, and I know when to use them, and that's when you start like getting into that point. I think as a first gen hunter, as an adult onset hunter, um, when you've gotten that many years under your belt and you're applying that information that you've been learning.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like with everything in life, there are costs and benefits to the route you choose.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've learned a lot of deep knowledge about hunting whitetails in Iowa, where my experience is mostly
Mm-hmm.
Western hunting. I've probably technically spent more time hunting whitetails, but it's always in different locations. It's never been
Yep.
in the same place. And so there are benefits to
Oh
that
yeah.
because you learn how to walk into a new piece, but I don't have the depth of knowledge that you have on the type of hunting that you're doing, and especially for one
Mm-hmm.
species. you can see the pronghorn here. What you don't see are the whitetails and the elk and the axis deer that I haven't gotten
Yeah.
back from the taxidermist yet. Those are all different types of hunting, but it's kind of like the jack of all trades and the master of none.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that either of us will ever be masters, because there's always more to learn
Oh
and there's
yeah.
always room for
Yep.
improvement.
Yep.
But I think that when you're going out on this journey as a first gen hunter, you got to figure out what you want to do, and what inspires you the most. And that, because you got to have passion for it. If you're not really driven, it's tough, because there are seasons where you're going to eat a tag.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the beginning, you're going to eat a lot more tags than you're going to fill. That's
That's
for sure.
exactly right.
And if you're not figuring out, like for me, I love whitetail hunting, but getting an elk tag fires me up way
Yep.
more than hunting whitetails in Texas. And I love it. I love the challenge, but it's different experiences. And there's nothing wrong with
Mm-hmm.
either. That person that you mentioned that does the weekend hunting and only does it, 3, 4 weekends out of an entire season, they're still contributing dollars to wildlife conservation. And we need those people,
Yeah.
because ideally they're going to advocate for us before anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's, I hope no one interprets what I was saying as like that person needs to get with the program. No, that they've probably, especially if they've been doing it for years and years that way, that what they've probably done is they've probably settled into hunting as much as they're wanting to, and that's totally fine.
Yep.
If everyone was how can I hunt multiple species in multiple states every year? If every hunter was that way, we'd run out of tags really quick, and it would take us forever to draw tags. And so, it's totally fine for people to choose their speed. But I do think though that when somebody decides to become an adult onset hunter, a first gen hunter as an adult, it's probably because they're looking for that lifestyle. And so they're naturally going to be doing it more like you have and I have, with wanting to just absorb as much information on it and experience from it as we can.
Yeah. I think that going and when you get into it, for me, one of the big draws was the food
Mm-hmm.
aspect. I'm not sure what the biggest thing for you was, but when you have that connection and that purpose behind it, it makes dealing with the difficulty easier. But I agree, you want to be part of that lifestyle. I mean, you can't walk into my house and not know that they're like, this is a hunting family. We live and breathe
Yep.
that lifestyle. We want to be outdoors as much as possible. Um, and I think that when you get into it, that you're knowing that you're going to make that lifestyle change. One thing you mentioned that I wanted to ask about, you were a biology
Mm-hmm.
teacher, and you referenced that in your podcast a lot, that your background and understanding of science. And now you work for, I think it's Hoxie Native
Yep.
Seeds. Was hunting a driving factor for that? And how has that change in your career affected you from a hunting aspect?
Man, those are some really important questions. I should back up a little bit here in my story just a touch. Even though I didn't grow up hunting, I grew up as an outdoors kid. My dad was a city slicker, but he was in the Boy Scouts growing up. And so he valued camping, he valued, canoeing and fishing and hiking. And so I did a lot of those things as a kid. In fact, I went on some, there's probably kids that grew up deer hunting, as soon as they could walk, that didn't have some of the outdoor experiences that I had by the time I was 10 years old. I'd my dad
That's
my
awesome.
dad would take me and my brothers with some of his friends that he grew up with, and we would go out to the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness in southwest Montana, and we would do a week of backpacking and trout fishing. That's where I learned a love for wilderness and a love for wild places. I was in a way born with a silver spoon in my mouth when it came to hunting access. Even though I didn't hunt, my grandparents had a 240-acre farm with quite a bit of habitat, all things considered, compared to the average Iowa farm. They had a fair bit of habitat on there. And when I was 7, I got my first BB gun because my dad wanted my older sister and me to learn how to cross the monkey bars. I think he thought we were like being little wimps or something. And he told my sister, he's like, if you can cross those monkey bars, I'll give you anything you want. And because he's like, she's not going to do it. And I heard that and I was like, what did you just say? And like, get out of the way, Melissa. And I was like,
uh,
I want a BB gun. And my dad didn't want to get it for me, I don't think, but he did. He went through on his word. And so I wandered that 240 acres, as a kid growing up with that BB gun and falling in love with that adventure and being outside and just learning a deep, deep, deep connection. And I can't express that enough. I have a very deep connection to place and to land. A lot of that came from being allowed to live like that as a kid and being taken in on some of those experiences. We went on a couple Boundary Waters canoeing trips as a kid, and just really, really got to see. And plus, just your regular vacations that you do as a kid, going out to Yellowstone, going out to, Rocky Mountain National Park, going to the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, going to all these places and seeing the value that these natural places had. But then to kind of go more directly to your question, my parents set that really good foundation for me. Then when I got into hunting, I want to say, I don't mean to be condescending here, but I got in with the right group of hunting influences, both in my like one-on-one life, but from who I followed for learning content. My biggest like hunting knowledge mentor was a podcast, Wired to Hunt podcast. Mark
Mark
Kenyon
Kenyon
hosted.
has a
Great.
great. I devoured that
Yeah,
podcast. Yeah.
same. And that's how I, really learned to take those next steps as a hunter. And guess what? Mark is a really, really strong voice for conservation. And so my conservation ethic started to build through that. And then I started to, through Mark, started to follow Meat Eater and Steven Ranella. Just what a mind, and what a voice. And of course, then you listen to those two guys long enough talking about conservation, you're going to start learning about Doug Duran, right? And Doug Duran, I really credit with bringing, and I'm actually good friends with Doug now, and I was just talking about this on the phone with him yesterday. I credit Doug, and he'd probably be like, "No, you're saying too much," but I really think it's true that he kind of brought the voice of Aldo Leopold back to everyone's attention, and I think Mark helped with that too, honestly, because he was that's really where I had heard the name, and I'd kind of heard about some of the stories, but Mark really started talking about it, and Doug really talked about it, and Doug has really run with it, and he's doing his new Sharing the Land program, which is based off of Aldo's Riley Game Cooperative concept. So listening to all those great influences and how much they valued the land and that became like this next level where, okay, hunting isn't just about taking anymore. Hunting is about savoring. I think you talked about that when you
Yep.
were on my podcast about how you've just learned patience and contentment through hunting. And I think that that's kind of like a next level when you really pursue the hunting lifestyle. And going back to getting the right influence, the wrong influence tells you that it's all about taking. How can I stack
Yep.
them up? How can I make this all about me? And how can I make this all about the trophy value, all about how this makes me look, about how this, and those temptations are still there. They are, let's be honest. When we shoot a giant buck, or big old elk, or a nice mule deer or something, what we're excited to post it, right? Look at this, everybody.
Yeah.
But if you follow that influence all the way to the end, it's all about yourself. Whereas if you follow the other influence, the good side of the influence, it makes it about others first and about the wild places that you're enjoying this activity at. And I know that some of my friends who are truly some of the greatest conservationists alive, whether people know them or not, they would, and if they still hunt, they would tell you that they'd give up hunting in a heartbeat if the trade-off was that things could be better for the ecosystem where those animals live. And I hope I get to that point. I I
Yeah.
I I really do. And so naturally, I learned about a lot of that stuff in college when I was, like you mentioned, when I was studying to be a biology teacher. I had a lot of natural interest there, and I was a teacher for 8 years. And I I had a good run as a teacher. I feel like I did a good job. I got a lot of great feedback from parents and administrators and students and stuff like that. And so, like I had I guess you would say, you know, by whatever measurables there are, I had a very successful career as a biology teacher. But I always felt like it wasn't quite what I, drew fulfillment
It didn't
from.
scratch that
Right,
itch.
exactly. It didn't like, yeah, you just, and
It didn't get you excited to be up on a Monday morning,
right,
right?
yeah, not the exact opposite. And honestly, teaching, my hat's off to teachers. It is an incredibly, I think a lot of people look down on teachers like, they're a bunch of bumbling fools. No way. I have, been around people from a lot of different industries, and those industries would run a lot better if they employed teachers, because teachers know how to do literally 100 things at once and under
Yeah.
very tight time constraints, with a lot of people ready to yell at them and call them names, and all while getting paid very poor wages.
Not great
Right,
salaries, yeah.
right. And so I have a ton of respect for teachers. I couldn't take it anymore, to be honest with you. The way our world has changed in the last 10 years, and I'm not talking just like political stuff here, I'm just talking like our societal expectations for both students and parents, and and communities. It's gotten to be where the classroom in a lot of cases can be a very hostile environment, where learning is no longer like the primary goal, and that's not good. And I couldn't take it anymore, and so I started looking at, scratching that itch again, like you said. Okay, what else would, the thing that I really loved about teaching was, other than dealing with these scientific concepts that I dealt with, hunting and conservation and stuff like that, I loved making a difference in students' lives that wanted to learn, that wanted to be a part of like the growth process. That was by far the best part, seeing those kids, like a concept click with them, and then seeing them pursue their dreams and all that. And I knew that that mattered a lot more than my paycheck did, and a lot more than, my personal satisfaction was, they were going on to have good opportunities, and that I, made a little bit of a difference there by being their teacher. That altruism really made me feel good, and so I knew that when I shifted my job, I didn't just want to chase a dollar somewhere, which was tempting to do when you're a teacher, because you're not making a lot of those dollars. But I knew that I needed to get into something else that would provide that altruistic drive that kept me going, and really it was working with our natural world in some capacity. And I met a just an excellent friend. Really, I call him my best friend, Luke Fritch. When we were teaching, we just, how you just meet somebody where you just think the same way about things. He was the, like, geometry teacher and algebra teacher, one of the algebra teachers at the high school where I was the biology teacher. And so he liked to hunt. He lived on his family's farm, and I was getting ready to move to my family's farm. We just started talking about prairie and how, we were teaching in Illinois. I lived in Iowa. He lived in just across the river in Illinois. And Illinois is known as, it's nicknamed the Prairie State, which is kind of a joke because, yeah, at one time, it was like 65 or 70% of Illinois, maybe it's more like 60%, something. I mean, pretty high percentage of the surface area of Illinois was prairie. Today, less than 1/10 of a percent, 1/10 of a percent
Wow.
is that native prairie remains on. And in Iowa, it's the same deal. Iowa was 75 to 80% prairie at one time, and now it's right about that 1/10 of a percent as well. So Iowa's really lost even more prairie than Illinois has, and that of course doesn't include like CRP ground and stuff, but those are reconstructed prairies, which they're great, they're wonderful. That's where I make my money, is in prairie reconstruction. But we all know that a remnant original virgin prairie is so much healthier for the ecosystem. And so through talking with my friend Luke Fritch, who is equally interested in hunting and agriculture like I was, and conservation, I just developed this passion for restoring prairie. And so when I left teaching, there was a local company, Hoxie Native Seeds, that I came across actually after an unsuccessful hunt with my other really, really close friend, Weston. We drove past that place and we're like, what was that? You know, we like snapped our heads over and we saw this native prairie grass growing there, this big green pheasant logo. I applied there. I basically sent him an email. I was like, hey, I'm looking to make a big career change. I will take anything you have, part-time, seasonal, full-time. What do you got? And my coworker Nicholas got my email and he's like, hey, why don't you come in for an interview? And they took me on, and I finished out the school year. I didn't want to leave the school high and dry, you know, trying to find a teacher in the middle of the year.
Oh,
So
yeah.
as soon as that school year ended, I went on a bear hunt to Montana, and on the following Monday, showed up for my first day of work on the prairie.
That's a journey. So you've been there. You did that. Montana, was that 2020?
That
You
was
did that bear hunt.
so I've been at Hoxie Native Seeds for almost a year and a half.
Okay.
So that hunt would have been in 2022, spring of 22.
Oh, that's right. It was a spring hunt.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you think has the experience that you've gained working with prairie, has that had any overlap with your hunting
Oh yeah,
capabilities, how you approach hunting? What are some of the lessons you think you've learned?
definitely it has. Uniquely, I think we talked about this when I had you on my podcast, dove hunting. I
Yeah.
I you know, doves are a migratory bird. I think a lot of people forget that. You know, they do at least in Iowa hold, you know, a portion of the population sticks around year round, but the bulk of the birds migrate to further south, and I think they really end up down by like Argentina or something. I think that if you really want to have a good time dove hunting, you go to Argentina. Watching the seasons change, you know, while I work, you know, I'm outside and I kind of track that migration a little bit. You know, at my latitude, it seems that the bulk of the birds show up like 2 weeks before the season starts, you know, and by the time the season comes around, it's like they've already headed south. So like watching little details like that, watching the blue wing teal come in, you know, in late August, we have a pond on the farm, and seeing some, you know, there's usually like 5 to 10 blue wing teal that'll come in, and you know, seeing how deer use grass instead of forest cover, and really understanding that difference between mule deer and a whitetail. A whitetail, yes, is native to Iowa. It would have been in great abundance in Iowa. And yes, they do use prairie grass, but they also need that timber element that's close by because they are truly an edge species. Whereas a mule deer, they could care less about the timber, is what I'm starting to learn. And not that we have mule deer here in Iowa, and we actually, it's not believed that we ever really did. But seeing, you know, because I'm planning a mule deer hunt right now to Nebraska for this December, and just through all the research I'm doing on that, it's like, no, they like it out in the open prairie. They're, you know, that's how they're most comfortable living. And just like seeing that difference, or seeing that how turkeys interact with prairie, and you know, it's so interesting. And then being able to put the whole picture together with, okay, what about the other big prairie species that were here in Iowa at one time? Elk. You know, elk are really a grassland species. Where do we hunt them though? We hunt them in the mountains because that's kind of where they found sanctuary when the age of market hunting was going on, and eradicating wildlife from our country. Unfortunately, you know, the species that were able, or the individuals that were able to hang on, were those that could really make a go of it in those harsher terrains, and that's what we have today. But truly, elk were throughout much of our country into the prairie states. We're seeing Nebraska get some of those back, and hopefully someday that'll happen for Iowa. But just seeing like how that would have worked, and then bison as well. You know, those of course were present here in Iowa, and in you know, a lot of the other Midwestern states as well, that they're no longer, you know, there's no longer wild herds of bison around. And so seeing that side of the wildlife, you know, and it's given me a passion. Like, that's why I'm going to the Sandhills in Nebraska. I mean, yeah, it works out great for timing for me for the time of the year, but also there's probably places I could go. I'm going to the Sandhills because that's the last prairie. It's known as the last like large scale prairie that we have in America, and that's why I'm going for the prairie. You know, I want to hunt a mule deer on the prairie. I think that would be really special.
That's so
So
cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your podcast and seeing how that goes. I think that's a muzzleloader hunt, right?
yes, yep, it's a late muzzle, or well, I guess there they just call it their muzzleloader season. But yeah, I love hunting with muzzleloaders. I think it's that nice balance between a gun and a bow, where you know you don't have. I think some people think that muzzleloaders, and truthfully, some of these modern, like really modern muzzleloaders, like I think Traditions made. I think they made what's called the Fire Stick, which is like you know a like the re
My friend and I were talking about that the other
yeah,
day.
yeah. And now CVA has one too, and I really love CVA. It's a great muzzleloader brand. That's what I use. But they're now making a similar thing, and you know I'm not going to knock any company or anything like that. I just think that you know we got to be careful when we do stuff like that too. You know, and the same argument can be made for cell cams, and the same thing can be made for you know like all these like how much e-bikes are starting to factor into to hunting. You know, when we start like I think man we're really getting like off topic here. I'm sorry man, but it's a fun
No, this
it's a
is
fun
great. This
rabbit
is
hole.
great.
I think so many of our problems come from the fact that we as humans pursue comfort so hard. I mean, it's just like what? So
Yep.
why do we have e-bikes? Well, because it's really hard to get way back in there quietly, and it'd just be so nice if I could sleep in an extra 20 minutes. I mean, we don't say those things. We don't say that. Oh, it makes me a more effective hunter. That's what we say. But
Uh,
what are
yeah.
we really saying? We're saying that it allows me
Convenience.
right, or it allows me more convenience. That's a great way to sum it up. That's really like if we really had to if we had the gun to our head and said why do you pursue all of this stuff, and I'm just as guilty. I'm not like preaching against people and I'm on my high horse here. I do stuff out of convenience, absolutely, you know, but we got to be careful with that because we, part of the beauty of the hunt. I have this friend named Brad Willie from well, it used to be White Mountain Buck Trackers. Now he's a part of Big Woods Bucks with Hal Blood and up there in New England. And
Oh
Brad
yeah.
Willie is about as hardcore of a human being as there is on the planet right now. Everyone listening in, you need to follow Brad. You can look up just Brad Willie, spelled Willey, or you can look up White Mountain Buck Trackers on Instagram, and you'll find out who Brad is. Brad is now a police officer. He's a 82nd, I think it's 82nd Airborne veteran who fought in Iraq and maybe Afghanistan, I believe. He also is a buck tracker. Yes, he goes into these huge, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of acres of national forest, cuts a buck track and follows it till he finds a buck and then kills it and then hauls it out of there. I mean, the dude is tough as nails. And he that to me emulates the highest degree. I mean, there's guys doing similar things out west too, you know, with elk and that. Yeah, of course, you know, when you got a bigger, heavier animal, that's even. But that the same idea, right? He couldn't care less about comfort. You know what I mean? Like that's not in the equation there. And he enjoys hunting in its purest form because he forgoes all of those comforts. You know what I mean? And so uh, there's and I can be, you know, when it comes to the muzzleloader thing, I use an inline muzzle. I don't use a flintlock. You know, if I used a flintlock, now you're introducing some more struggle. But so the point is, I don't think it's wrong to use those fire sticks or whatever they are. I don't think it's wrong to use cell cams. I don't think it's wrong to use e-bikes, but you need to do a mental check. You need to say, am I trying to make this too much of a drive-through TV dinner experience where I can just try and reach a goal with it with you know as little effort as possible, or am I just trying to make things a little bit more doable? If you're just trying to make things a little bit more doable, then I think that that's fine. You know, that's great. But if you're just trying to take all the struggle an effort out of hunting, I think you need to check. And I can get, I'm probably, drinking the haterade right now, but I think there's got to be like a soul check there,
No, I completely agree. Like, you don't start hunting because of convenience. If you wanted convenience, you'd go to the store and
Right.
buy it like everybody
Right.
else. Like, part of the challenge and learning is what makes it fun. And I know there was a recent survey about, I posted about it a month or two ago, I think. They did the population survey they do every 1 to 3 years, and they review like what the general population thinks. And doing it for the challenge and experience is actually one of the lowest things that the general population
Mm.
cares for. But, you know, I think that's just because they don't understand. And it's hard to explain that to someone that hasn't had to struggle. We don't like telling stories. I mean, maybe it's fun to tell the story once from when you pulled up to a trailhead, walked away from your truck, and then you saw a bull and you killed it 20 yards from the truck. Like, that's a fun story to tell once.
Yeah.
But the story where you have to hike in 6 miles and it took you 5 days and you didn't see anything and
Yep.
it was cold and miserable, and then on the last morning of the last day you see your bull and you take your shot, that's the story that
Yes.
you actually want to tell.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily enjoy the type 2 fun in the moment, but I think at the end of the day we all want
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Everybody does. And the allure of convenience is really tough to beat, though,
Yeah.
like you said.
Well, and here's if what Andrew just said doesn't sell you, and it definitely sells me, because I 100% agree. The type 2 fun earned tags are just, they're just so much richer, so much deeper. But I have noticed this, and I imagine Andrew would agree with me on this from your Western experiences, especially. I have found that where comfort, this is like the phrase that I want people to like attribute to me someday. No, I'm just kidding. But this is something I like to say though. Where comfort and good hunting intersect is not frequent. The more comfortable you try to be, chances are the less opportunity you're going to have. It, it it's just true. I used to carry around for those first, when I was talking about how like that year 5 and 6 was really like a big transition for me, like taking another big step as a hunter, where I like was officially like bumping into the, okay, this guy is very serious about this. I used to carry around this stupid 5-gallon bucket with me whenever I would deer hunt, and pretty much whenever I'd hunt anything. And it had this nice padded seat on it, and it had a little swivel on it, so you can, like you could, you could, you
I
could,
know exactly what you're
yeah,
talking
and it
about.
was comfortable, but it was a pain in the neck to haul around. It was loud. You'd always forget, and you drop the handle when you set the bucket down, on there, and it's like, oh. And anytime and I did a lot of ground hunting, and that was part of being a first gen hunter too. You just don't have the money to get everything going, but
Yep.
it's uncomfortable to sit on the ground. You can't, it's hard to find a good surface to sit on, the right angle and be able to see. I wanted to be able to sit up so I could see higher, and it was a comfort thing, and it slowed me down and undoubtedly cost me opportunities because I was dragging this extra anchor through the woods with me. And then I started looking at this backpack that I always carried with me. Ooh, now I'm stepping on some toes because everybody carries a backpack with them when they go hunting, right? And you might have to. I understand that. I'd be stupid to think that everyone gets to just walk out their front door like I do and literally just keep walking until I get to my tree stand, cut out the truck part of it altogether. But so point being, because I'm so close to home, I don't need as much stuff. I get that. But I started looking at that backpack and I was like, wow, I never use this. I never use this. I never use this. I am carrying all this extra stuff that is weighing me down because I'm too afraid to go without it. And that is another anchor, right? Cody DeQuisto from Lone Wolf Tree Stands. I've never met Cody, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I've heard him on other podcasts, and he talks a lot about, dude, quit being so weighed down by all this stupid stuff you don't use and you don't need. And Once I started cutting that extra junk out of the equation, now for most of archery season, hey, I'm a dad, so I'm allowed to look stupid and not cool. Um, I wear a fanny pack, and I keep some basic like life-saving stuff in there. I think that's something every hunter should do, is you should keep a basic first aid kit, because whoever plans to fall onto a broadhead, whoever plans to um, cut themselves real bad on an artery while they're gutting an animal, whoever plans to fall out of a tree stand, all these things, right? So you should have some of that stuff. And then like food, everyone wants to bring food to the stand and they're going out there to hunt for 3 hours. You can't go without eating for 3 hours, dude. What's up with that? Leave the
Yeah.
snacks at home. Everyone wants to bring a ton of water and they're going to be back in their truck. And, now obviously if you're going hunting in Arizona or Nevada or something like that, yeah, you better have a lot of water and you better have plans to how to get more. You're going to die. But, make those plans according to what your situation is, and don't be so weighed down by all this superfluous junk that is there simply for comfort. And, and that applies to bigger things too. All I can do is ground hunt. So all I'm going to do is hunt in a ground blind. I'm with Andrew on ground blinds. Ground blinds, not always, definitely not always, but a lot of times are an anchor. They limit what you can see. You know what you can do? You can be just as camouflaged if you just sit really still, get a good camo game going, use terrain features as your blind. And I'm not talking cutting branches and building a blind. No, just tuck yourself into a tree. Get into a clump of grass. Use that landscape, and guess what? Now you don't have to haul this tent with you everywhere you go. And by the way, you don't have to uh, uh, apologize to those around you that hear you when you're trying to put that stupid blind away and you can't remember how the dang thing folds up. But like there's so many things like that. I killed my first deer out of a tower stand. That's the last time I ever went to a tower stand. They're great. I think people can have good success from them. And like if you have a young hunter, like I use a turkey blind once a year. It's when I go turkey hunting with my dad, who does not hunt, and my son, who's 6 years old. Like it makes sense to be in a blind then, right? And
Yep.
but when I'm on my own, forget the blind. I want to be able to move. I want to be able to get into better cover, reposition for a shot. And guess what? It worked out. I got my first turkey this year. And if I had been in a blind, absolutely not. I would not, no way would I have gotten that turkey. And so leaving that comfort behind, but conventional wisdom says you need a turkey blind, right? They even call it that. They call it a turkey blind. Maybe, but good chance no. If you're willing to like be uncomfortable and sit out in the rain, sit in a thorn patch, do what it takes to get to be a good predator. The mountain lion doesn't need a blind. The wolf doesn't need a tower stand. These are things that they're a part of the ecosystem, and they have no choice but to be a part of it. And I think as hunters, if you really want to be a good hunter, that's your goal. How can I become part of this ecosystem? And leaving behind the superfluous junk, the comforts, just helps you take that step further. And the reward, both in the way that Andrew talked about, you have that deeper, more meaningful experience reward, but even just literally getting a shot opportunity is more common, is more frequent. And so I think every first gen hunter needs to understand that reality. And I think every veteran hunter needs to evaluate that in their hunting experience as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that a couple of things came to mind while you were talking. One of them was an old saying from the Marines,
Mm.
which is situation dictates. There's technically a longer one. It's METTC, which I'm not going to explain what that acronym is because it totally doesn't matter for this context. But the summary of it is situation dictates.
Yeah, I like that.
And I've hunted in a lot of different ways. I've done hanging hunts.
Mm-hmm.
I've done on the ground, spot and stalk. I've done the mobile setups out west where you're hunting out of your truck
Mm-hmm.
and you're using that as a base camp and then you move locations. And the way I set up my gear is dependent entirely on where I'm going, the type of hunting I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing, and the situation. But also, the second thing that came to mind was experience. And unfortunately, I think it's hard won experience because you could get the curated list from, I could give you one,
Mm-hmm.
Kent can probably give you one, but you're not going to know what works for you until you
Yep.
actually get out there and try it. And in the beginning, you're going to carry too much gear.
Yep.
We all do it.
Yep.
You'll hear someone on podcast be like, "Oh yeah, when I go out west, my backpack is 44 pounds or whatever." And I remember my first backpack on my first Western hunt was like 75
Yep.
pounds.
Yep.
Like, how do you have a 44-pound pack? But over time, if you think about it, you have to think about it and evaluate it after the fact. Did I use this?
Yep.
What would I do if I needed that something like this and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have it? Is there a way I can get a multi-purpose tool or something else that can do the same thing?
Yep.
You have to figure that out for yourself, but you also have to think about it and realize what you're trying to get out of the experience. Because to Kent's point, a lot of this stuff is an anchor and it weighs you down and it can limit opportunities for you, which will inevitably limit your success.
Absolutely.
And that is something that everyone needs to think about regardless of their experience. No one is too good or too experienced to not do an after action review from
Yep.
their hunt and
Yep.
evaluate, what worked, what didn't. I love that. That was really great.
Yeah, I think I just want to restate something you did. I love that idea of doing an after hunt like dissection of, just a personal evaluation. I think the most highly effective people, not let's take hunting out of the picture even for anything, the most highly effective people on the planet are those who self-reflect. How can I hone? How can I make this better? And so I 100% agree with what you just said there.
I wanted to ask you about this experience tradition you have with your dad. And I think it resonates a
Mm.
lot with me because, like we talked about on my when I was on your podcast, my dad passed away before I
Mm-hmm.
started hunting, so I don't have the ability to share this with him. But you did a post where talking about the tradition you have with your dad, where you go and you make a whole day out of going to get your taxidermy from Old Barn
Mm-hmm.
Taxidermy. The specific post was your October muzzleloader buck,
Mm-hmm.
and that hit me really really hard, and I was hoping that you could kind of talk about what it's like being able to share that type of experience with your dad, what that looks like and what it means to you.
Yeah, you're actually making me feel a little emotional right now because that is a special thing. It's something that growing up, I never would have thought that was ever going to be a thing. And my dad listens to every one of my first gen hunter podcasts, and my dad could not care less about ever going hunting himself, other than he likes doing our turkey tradition every spring. I think this was our third season we did it in a row, um, with him, my son, and myself. And we would have had a turkey this year. The only problem was it was a hen. We called it in from. We put our decoys out. And we called it in from like literally 500-600 yards, and things strutted right through our decoys, but hung out in our decoys with all of its new zombie friends that didn't talk back or do much moving. But it hung out for like 10-15 minutes, and he was taking all kinds of videos and sending them to my family, and like, this is so cool. So I love that aspect of it. And I think, so I'm going to send this episode to my friends and family. So the cards are on the table here a little bit. But I'm okay with admitting this. I like taking him hunting on his farm, because this is on his farm. Again, back to being born with a silver spoon in my mouth as far as hunting access goes. I like to take him to his farm because he values his farm deeper when he can experience it in that way. Hunters value the ground. Good hunters hunting for the right reasons, I will never be convinced otherwise, value the ground deeper and more meaningfully than any other person enjoying that ground. It's just true. Sorry, you love bird watch. You love bird watching. Fantastic. I got a deeper connection to this ground. You love fishing. Great. You're getting closer. I still have a deeper connection to this ground. You love shed hunting. You love, go on and on down the list. You love farming. That's fantastic. I love it. I love farming too. But until you see this place as an ecosystem and you as a part of this ecosystem that is playing for keeps, you can't throw it back if it's not big enough. You just cannot enjoy it to the same depth as what I do. And so I love taking him on that turkey hunt every year. And that's another tradition that we have, because I know that I help build that bridge for him. Even though he's not hunting, he's just observing. It's getting him close to that. When it comes to our taxidermy trip, first of all, I got to shoot something that's big enough to go get taxidermied, right? So
Yeah.
that's already exciting. That's already special. And I think we talked about this when you came on my show. When you're a first gen hunter and you go on like a hunting trip and you come back with tag soup, it's kind of viewed as, oh, you didn't get anything.
Yep.
Sorry
Yep.
that those couple $1,000 you spent was just a big old waste. And they're not trying to be mean. They're not trying to be condescending to you or like, oh, told you so. It's just they don't get it. They don't understand how
Yep.
incredibly difficult all of that was and how many things you did get right without filling that tag, right? It
Mm-hmm.
takes, like when you filled your elk tag, you told me that story, you literally had to get like probably 1,000 decisions right that led up to that, at least, right? You had to get,
Yeah.
but what if you had
Uh-huh.
missed the shot? What if you got,
Oh
what if
man.
you had gotten part 1,000 wrong, but you got 999 things right? Are you a loser now because you got 999 things right, but you got one thing wrong? Sorry, Andrew. No, that's ridiculous, right? You if you had come back after missing that shot, you would have been so much better of a person in every way because you got 999 more things right in your life than you'd ever gotten in any previous experience, right? And so,
Yep.
like, when I develop as a hunter and we develop as first gen hunters, there's so much of that because the people in our lives probably don't hunt. That's probably why we're a first gen hunter. And so when they see you going season after season without coming back with a trophy animal, it's like, yeah, he can keep wasting his time with this, I guess. I guess he likes doing it. And they don't understand all that background stuff that has kept us going back to keep wasting our time, right? And not that I'd ever been accused of that or anything like that by my family, but I could tell that if they're gonna see that this is this is a valuable use of my time, then I'm gonna have to start finding some success, and that's a drive. And I think it's okay to have that. Like, you're gonna have to start filling some tags, and that's for yourself too, to prove to yourself that, yeah, you should keep going, because you know what, I still haven't killed an animal with my bow yet. I've been doing this for 9 years. I've hit like 3 or 4 bucks and I can't get my shot placement right, and it drives me nuts. And I can't tell you how many times I have said out loud to myself, I need to quit doing this. I need this is I can't do it. I'm just wounding animals. This is terrible. But I can't do that, right? I have to keep on the horse, and I will, and eventually I'm going to be a stone cold killer. It might
Yes,
it
you
might
will.
take me 25 years to get there, but I'm going to keep pushing till I get there, right? Because other people have proven that you can do that, and so I can do that,
Yep.
right? And so maybe finding that success is sometimes proving it to yourself, right? After you've broken the ice on that first animal that you tag or bag, it comes easier after that. Success builds on itself. There's attrition behind that success, and it culminates, right? And or becomes cumulative. I don't know what the right word is. I was a biology teacher. But it also is true to your family and your friends. And so him coming along and then seeing, whoa, that the first like big buck I got back in 21, he gets to see this beautiful shoulder mount. And that's a shout out to Old Barn. I appreciate you mentioning they're one of my sponsors. Old Barn just does world class taxidermy work. And so he sees this beautiful 10-point, 150-inch buck that came off of his farm. And you could tell he was just like, wow, that is cool and that is special. Well, and Old Barn does a great job too. Like, it's not just going up to some guy's like crusty old cabin that, that like a converted double wide trailer into a taxidermy shop. They got a beautiful showroom. So you're in there and you're seeing all these bucks. And I know a lot of the names that are hanging there off the tags. Oh, that's Judd McCollum's buck. What about Tim Sylvia? Timmy the Maniac Sylvia from the UFC. Yeah, he takes his bucks there. I get to see his bucks hanging on the wall. A UFC heavyweight Hall of Famer, the one guy who refused to tap out when he was in an arm bar and they snapped his arm in half. Yeah, he takes his bucks there to Old Barn. You get to see that. You get to see like the working class bow hunter crew. Kurt Geyer and a good friend of mine, Cole Young. Cole Young is a tremendous whitetail hunter, and he shot a 195-inch buck in Illinois on his like second time hunting that deer. The whole story's on my podcast, by the way. It's just incredible. I need to have Cole back on my podcast. I was just thinking that the other day. You should have Cole on here sometime. He's not a first gen hunter, but man, he's a killer.
I'm not exclusive to just first gen hunters.
Yeah, that's good. I will gladly pass on Cole's information. I can see Cole Young's buck, and it's him getting to see all that too, and me being excited about it gets him excited about it. And it's this fun time. Plus, the other part about it is we get a lot of that windshield time. It's 2 hours from my house to Old Barn Taxidermy, and it's 2 hours from my parents' house, maybe a little bit closer, like an hour 45 from my parents' house. So it makes no difference to just drive, I got a 2.5 hour drive back to my parents' house, and then a 2 hour drive to the taxidermist, but it's worth it. Either I can spend that time just listening to podcasts and books and stuff like that and drive there and back and, celebrate it by myself or something. But to go that extra way, make a weekend out of it. My dad and I drive down there. We get to talk for 2 hours on the way there. We get lunch on the way back and hang out and talk. And he is immersed in that hunting experience and gets to figure it out a little bit more about what makes me tick and what, and we catch up on things. We build our relationship up and man, that's just some of my most favorite moments. Those are the days I wish I could just push pause on and just let it drag out for another day or two. But unfortunately it's over in a 24-hour day, and you got to wait till the next time you shoot a slob to bring your dad along to go get it. So hopefully I can deliver again this year. I put a pretty strict rule on myself. I said, for any species, I have to shoot a bigger one each year in order to go get another taxidermy job. And so far that worked out for these last 2 years. But this year I'm hunting mule deer, so that'll be the first of it. So if it's an impressive enough animal that deserves a shoulder mount, but even if it's any buck, I'm going to go get the skull, the Euro mount done by Old Barn as well.
Yep.
And I'm sure he'd still ride along for that too. But it's a pretty special deal though, that whole day with him. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, those moments are priceless. Like we only get so many hunting seasons. There's only going to be so many of those moments that you get to share with the people that are closest to you.
Yep.
And you never know, and I'm acutely aware of this from my time in the military. You lose friends, unfortunately, and you never know when that last time is going to be to hang out with somebody or to share that experience. Yep. And it makes those moments more precious. And I think I'm acutely aware of this too, because I started hunting when I was 25 or 26.
Mm-hmm.
I am very aware, like if I'm lucky, I only have so many hunting seasons, you know?
That's right.
And you got to take in those moments and just appreciate them. I wanted to talk about that because that post, it was one of the ones that I commented on it, and I literally just sat there and thought about it. I'm like, man, that's so cool. That's such a unique experience.
I appreciate that.
And I'm as someone who can't do that, I'm happy that people like you can, and you don't take it for granted, because those moments are special. And I'd give up a lot of things to be able to do that with my dad. I think it would be really cool. So thank you for sharing that story. And sorry I made you emotional.
No, it's good. It's good to tap into that every now and then. I try to be crusty and unemotional, and it's good to be hit in a vulnerable spot every now and then.
Well, I definitely want to have you back on again because there are plenty of things I wanted to talk about, but we're already almost an hour and a half into
Yeah,
this
this is a
thing.
good conversation, and I'm long-winded, so I apologize to you. I have the gift of gab. I used to be a teacher. I got paid to talk. So
No, this is great. I mean, this is great, and having the gift of gab is great for a podcast. But to close this out, I wanted you to think about, you know, 2015
mhm.
Kent and where you were starting, you're brand new, getting into hunting. What advice from all of the years you now have experience hunting yourself, all of the podcasts that you've done with some incredible hunters, the friends that you've made along the way, what are the lessons and advice that you would give to that version of you, the old version of you, that other first gen hunters could take away from your experience and what you've learned through your journey?
Boy, I've never been asked that before. I don't even know if I've really thought about that deeply before. That is a very good question. Well, first of all, I'm uh, a religious person. If you go on my Instagram, you'll see the first thing it says is Christ follower, and I'm serious about that. I feel a little dorky that it's up there. I'd probably get more follows if I didn't put that there, but it's such an important part of me, and more important than anything else is being genuine, right? Being true to what you are and what you believe, and so I think there needs to be a spiritual element to that because hunting, we can celebrate how much of a wormhole that can become for us, where we just dive down it and deeper, and we just the more time you spend, the better. And that's true sometimes, but not all times, right? It's not always good for our families. You know how that is. You have a wife, and
Yep.
there's responsibilities to those relationships. And there's a lot of guys, some of the best, most skilled hunters, have lost their families in pursuit of an animal. And a pursuit of an animal is a very high and very worthy thing, but it's not more worthy than the people in our lives, and it's not more worthy than the God who created it all. And there's a Bible verse that just finishes in this way. I think it was the Apostle Paul said it. People who sought the creation more than they valued the creation more than they valued the creator. And so I think I would have told myself that, keep that in mind. And I try to keep that in mind now, because sometimes I do become too obsessive and become too selfish with it. And I become self-focused through those goals, through those dreams, through those adventures that I want to have. But then from a hunting standpoint, what I would tell myself is celebrate every small victory in some way. So often sat in the pit of despair on what I messed up, kind of like we were talking about the example of a successful hunt. If you had missed that shot on your elk, it would have been easy to dwell on the one thing you got wrong and not look at the 999 things you got right. And I've gotten better at that, but for the first probably 3-4 years, that's what stunted my growth. I think in some ways I would make mistakes and I would just dwell on them in a not good way. It's good to be self-reflective, like we were talking about. That's critically important to say, wow, I got this and this wrong. Next time I'm going to do this instead, and that should fix it. It's good to do that. It's very good to do that. It's very important to do that, necessary to do that. But it's also good to say, okay, I did do this. And even though I missed the shot on that buck, I totally played the wind perfectly. I got into the perfect position, because you're going to remember those things and you're going to take them back the next time, and you're going to be able to pull that tool out of your toolbox, because that's really what a first gen hunter is, right? You're starting out and you have almost zero tools in your toolbox. You got like one of those 9-piece kit of tools that you get from Walmart, where it gives you like a little dinky hammer and like a crescent wrench that barely adjusts, and a little baggie of
Mm-hmm.
screws, and now that's your toolkit. And that's where we're all at when we're first gen hunters. We have no tools. We might have a good pair of hiking boots. We might have a raincoat, and we might have a pair of bird watching binoculars that we got from our grandpa. We have nothing, but you're adding tools. If you want to get better, you're adding tools to your toolbox. And yes, part of that is the gear, but so much more of it is the knowledge, the skills, the tactics that build you up and make you a successful hunter. And you're picking those up every single time you go hunting. You pick up more tools on the ground. It's kind of like playing a video game. Remember 007 GoldenEye back in the day,
Yep.
N64,
Yep.
running around picking up all those guns and stuff. It's kind of like that. You're out there, you learn, you maybe put in on a string of unsuccessful stalks on a spot and stock hunt. Well, each one of those, you picked up a new skill. You may not know it. You may have learned to read the wind. You may have learned to read the body language of the animal better. You may have learned to use the terrain features as a screen instead of just the vegetation as a screen, right? You may have learned how to use sunlight to your advantage. There's all these different things that you pick up each time you go out. And if all you ever do is another unsuccessful stalk, well, then you don't remember that, yeah, you put yourself in a great spot because the sun was directly in that animal's eyes and he couldn't even see you. But he smelled you because the thermals shifted and it dragged your scent stream right under his nose. And if you instead choose to celebrate the fact that you made that one thing, you did it really, really well, then you're going to keep that in your toolbox. You're going to say, you know what, if it's a dead calm day and I can't really use the wind as cover, I might be able to use the setting or rising sun as cover. Or I might be able, there's not a lot of vegetation here. Well, if I just read these ridge lines the right way, I can probably use those ridge lines as a good as a good source of cover. And there's a million other things you can add to that, right? Food sources, water sources, travel routes, bedding areas. You can stack all that together, and the people that end up like Remy Warren, who in my opinion is possibly the greatest hunter in the world right now,
Yep.
he's got like one of those, those garages where they have like the two giant rollout tool boxes with all the slide out drawers that are, perfectly oiled and don't squeak and all that. You and I, we're going to the garage sale looking for the old rusty one of those that's you got a WD-40, all the drawers, and and half the tools are
Yep.
rusted out, but we're working on cleaning it up and we're working on refining it and we're working on making that thing a well-oiled machine. And I think that's what we got to kind of view our tool set as a first gen hunter, as we get more by celebrating the little micro successes that we have along the way. And so I think that's what I'd encourage everyone else who's in that that blossoming stage of becoming a hunter is celebrate the things you do get right, and fix the things you don't, and keep pushing, keep going out there, keep everything in perspective, like I said, and don't make it more important than things that it shouldn't be more important than, and all of it will come together and it'll make this beautiful final product. In the end, you'll be a great hunter.
Love it. Thank you again so much for sharing and coming on my podcast. I had a great conversation with you. I definitely want to have you back on
Oh, I'd love
in
to,
the
man.
future sometime. Please plug your podcast, plug Hoxie Native Seeds, plug it all. Let people know where to connect with you. Everyone, please follow Kent. Follow everything he does. Listen to his podcast. Everything is great. Yeah, I'll make sure everything's in the show note too. But where can people follow you? Where can they connect?
Yeah, well, first of all, just thank you again, Andrew. Love coming on your show. I'd love to have you back on my show again soon. We need to do a hunt together. That would be a ton of fun. Yeah, just thank you again for having me, though. If you'd like to follow along, you can check out the First Gen Hunter podcast, which is on every podcast hosting site. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. You can follow me on Instagram at first.gen.hunter and DM me. I love getting messages from people who like to listen to the show. That's really the best part, is communicating with people that are being helped by the information. And so I'd love to, you got, I don't know everything, far from it. And I definitely don't have the hunting experience that a lot of other guys do, but thankfully through the podcast, I've been able to connect with a lot of people who do. So I can probably point you in the right direction or dig up some info for you. And I'd love to help you in any way that I can. You can also tune into another podcast I host called the Prairie Farm Podcast, all things conservation. we definitely talk hunting on there. We talk to some great hunters on there, but we also talk to butterfly people, and we talk to let's see, what other kind of people, just like flower people, gardeners, homesteaders, wildlife biologists, on and on down the list, historians. We talk to all kinds of people on there. There's just a really diverse mix of information there, and the same thing with the First Gen Hunter podcast that covers far more than just interviewing first gen hunters. That's an important part of the show, of course. It's not just how to's, it's great hunting stories. I always try to tell people, listen to episode 113 first. It's just a bear attack story. A grizzly, this guy is the toughest guy on the planet. He fought off a grizzly with nothing but his hands, and I resisted saying his bare hands.
But you missed a good pun opportunity
that's right,
there.
right. I tried to, but I'm a dad, so I had to call it out anyways. But yeah, you can check out that episode. That's just an incredible Jeremy Evans, story, but also great episodes with Andrew. Like you said, episode 173. You can listen to that. We got elk content, whitetail content, some waterfowl content, bear hunting content. What else do we have on there? Musk ox might be. Oh, we got a couple moose episodes. I don't know if I've done any caribou yet. I need to do a caribou story. So all sorts of bison hunts, all sorts of stuff on there. You want to check it out. I think we have 174, 175 episodes now. So definitely tune into that. But yeah, thanks again, Andrew. Thanks so much for hosting me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to the next one.
For sure.
Well, that is a wrap for the episode with Kent. I thought this was a really great episode. I always love talking to him. We've talked a few times now. I can't wait to have him back on the podcast. Please make sure you're following him if you're not already. He produces a great podcast. He has a lot of good content. Make sure to give him a follow and reach out to both of us. Let us know what you thought. Make sure you tell him that you heard about him on the EndurHunt podcast. And looking forward to getting your feedback and having Kent back on again sometime. Thank you, as always, for taking the time out of your day to listen to this podcast or watch it if you're on Spotify video or on YouTube. It's great to do it there as well. But if you're just on the audio podcast, I still appreciate you being here. Either way, I want to get the content out there for the masses to enjoy. So I appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Hope you have a great day. I hope you are out hunting. We're in the middle of the hunting season now. Please tag me in your stuff. If you get something, I would love to share it. And until next time, see you.